Welcome to the Wisdom Check by Tabletop to Keyboard. This is going to be our bi-weekly podcast where we discuss things such as Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I think maybe we need to turn up my mic a little bit, guys. How about some more game?
This is the Wisdom Check! This is the intro to end all intros. Talk about Dungeons, Dragons, and
Now, I don't think that's proper. This is a family show after all. This is the intro we can use, fellas. It's good, clean fun for everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Check, where we have wholesome conversations about the dilemmas we face every day.
Nah, hold on a second. I got your intro right here. Yeah, that's better. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. When I'm right, Jeff's wrong, we're going to have guests on to talk about it. It's going to be awesome. Because I said so.
He is right. He did say so. I don't know. Is surf music the best music for a podcast about D&D?
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
This just in, nobody can agree on our intro for this podcast. So we're just going to start. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Roll for initiative. Fuck. A 1. It's like every time.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. And you may be noticing we got an extra person today. So we are going to take on our first of many guests. And we'd like to say a warm welcome to Jowzam. Hey
guys. Man? Good. Thanks for having me. This is super cool. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome, man. Much appreciated. So tell us a little bit about your group and where we can find you.
All right. Well, I run and operate Jowzam's Den here on Twitch and on YouTube. You can find it under both those names at both those places. On there, we do live and actual plays of role-playing games, a variety of games. It's typically a revolving door of games. I'll run something for 3 to 5 sessions. I like to ask the creator on, and I'll do an interview with them afterwards, and then we'll jump on over to another game. Currently, we've got Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells going on. We have an ongoing campaign of Forbidden Lands on Friday nights. And Tuesdays, we're looking at some 5e. And very shortly, we're going to start another long-term campaign. I'm prepping Masks of Nyarlathotep, Call of Cthulhu.
Nice. Cthulhu.
But we're going to be using Pulp Cthulhu to play it. So this is like Tommy Guns and Sticks of Dynamite versus Cthulhu. So this is going to be be good. The survivability is going to be up there. They're not going to go crazy as fast. So
it's okay. They'll be alive to be tormented and mentally unstable.
Yeah,
it'll be great. So that's awesome. I didn't realize just the full extent that you were bringing on game creators and stuff to your. Oh yeah, that's freaking cool.
It's been awesome. They've been super nice. Everybody I've asked has always said yes. Super forthcoming, willing to sit down with me. Doesn't matter how big or how small they are on the totem pole. And they've been super gracious before and afterwards. I keep in contact with all of them.
That's fantastic. Who all have you had?
I have had Amit Moshe, the creator behind City of Mist, was their first guest. Cool. Followed by Daniel Fox of Zweihander. Nice. I had the gentleman behind the upcoming Against the Dark Master Kickstarter, which has been gaining a lot of traction and buzz. We had a lot of fun with it. It's like a retro clone of MERP or Rollmaster. So they were on board, and they're going to be hitting Kickstarter with that game later this year. I sat down with the CEO of Free League Publishing for Forbidden Lands not too long ago. And hopefully I'll have the creator of Cosmic Solar Blades and Cosmic Spells, I always get that messed up, here on the channel shortly. I've reached out to him already, and we'll sit down and talk to him. So yeah, it's been really cool. It's the strategy behind the channels. Play your game, showcase it to people, and then bring the creator on board, because we get tens of 20 of thousands of hundreds of hours of enjoyment on these games, but nobody really knows the personalities behind the games. So I figured, why not bring them on and showcase these great people who are making these things that we love. So it's been awesome.
Man, that is
Excellent.
fantastic. Yeah. Go ahead, Dustin.
So, what kind of systems did you get started in with tabletop RPGs? Like, how far back do you go?
How far back to go? So I started in the early 90s, and it was like as a path to role-playing games. So my group of friends and I, we pooled our money together, and I think the first thing we bought was a Warhammer 40k starter set, but it wasn't Warhammer 40k back then. I want to say it was like Dark Heresy or something. We bought one of those, and it was like Space Marines and Orcs. We played that for a few months, and we kind of got bored with it. Then we pulled our money together and we bought a BattleTech
Okay.
box.
Good
we did
stuff.
that for a while. And we're like, okay, this is fun.
So, you
this
started
is
out
really
in
cool.
wargaming.
We did, because we
You
didn't know
started
what we were
wargaming.
doing. And then we were like, why don't we try D&D? And we pulled our money together and bought the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. And then from there, it was just like, game on, and we tried all kinds of stuff.
That was second ed at the time?
Second edition, yeah.
Advanced second ed? Okay.
Yes. The black border one.
Yeah, that's the one we started out on too, I think. So.
Yeah, getting that early start there.
Yeah.
Very different type of game at that time. So
Yeah,
did you guys jump straight into like role playing, or did you kind of stick to your wargaming roots at that point?
We jumped right into role playing. We abandoned those games, which I think about today and cry, because they're probably worth a small fortune.
Yeah.
Like, whose basement are those games sitting in right now? But yeah, we went to role playing. We never looked back on the war games front, unfortunately, because we had a good time with those. Those are great games. Also, there's nothing against them. But we just we really found our stride with role playing games. From there, we did the we talked about before the show was mentioned, West End Games Star Wars game. We played that for years. We did Cyberpunk. We did a bunch of Palladium. What else did we do? If it was given to us, we tried it. Like if we encountered another group, we're like, let's give it a go. We weren't against trying any new game.
That's fantastic. A lot of people get stuck in their niche, right? Like they find the one thing they like, they don't go outside of that. And, I'm sure, it's fun and all, but people miss out on a lot of different takes on gaming, a lot of different systems and what they emphasize. Man, it sounds like you got a really cool setup going.
We were kind of that way for a long time. I mean, we stayed in second edition D&D for several years before we came across like Vampire in the World of Darkness and started in on several of those, D10 style games. And that was like a big change too, because like it plays so differently when you get a different system like that. Like you learn this whole system and you try to make it do the same thing that you've always done. Like we look back at our early World of Darkness games are horrible. We're like, why is this not working? Why does this seem so bad? Like, and then we realize it's because we were approaching the game completely wrong. The more systems you play in, it really can help you develop as a gamer. Like, so it literally opens up your toolbox to be able to do a lot more things. So
for sure, I agree.
Yeah, and you learn a ton just playing different games. You get a little sampling of different play styles as you kind of go. Like with the World of Darkness, I mean, they did things. It wasn't just like changing words. Like instead of a dungeon master, you had a storyteller. That actually kind of meant something a little different. You had this emphasis on story and narrative and like character and stuff. So like I think that actually did have a subtle effect on how you kind of approach the game over time. And I don't know, it's probably that way with a lot of the systems you're playing, that they all have kind of their little kind of hooks or something, the way they're structured, that really just kind of guides you to a different play style. Have you noticed any ones that really stand out to you?
These days or back then?
Either way, man.
Back then, I want to say Star Wars, because well, I loved the property, but I think it was also the ease of access, right? It was the D6 system. There wasn't a lot of rules to it. You just had a handful of D6s and just chucked them on the table and tallied up the result. So that one had a big impact, I think, on me that I gravitated towards. Setting wise, we were big fans. I don't know if you guys ever saw it or played it. There was a box set for D&D second edition. It was called Mask of the Red Death, and it was part of Ravenloft.
Yeah,
but it was
I remember that.
We played Ravenloft. I don't know if I remember that one particularly, but
Mask of the Red Death was set in like the 1890s. So it was like kind of more modern day, and it was like vampire hunters and gothic and things like that. And for style wise, that one really spoke to me and my group. We played a ton of that. We kind of moved away from fantasy D&D and played a lot more of that. And it was weird to play D&D with like firearms. We all had guns and things like that. So that was a really cool setting.
Now, is it more, I mean, obviously it's Ravenloft, so it's a little bit more of an emphasis on like horror, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. That's all it was. These days, I don't know. I started this channel and I like went right to games that were like super heavy and crunchy. I'm like, I want this, I love it, I want to play it. And now, after a year of doing that, I'm like, I want nothing but rules light games, and I'm loving those. So I don't think there's anything really that speaks to me overall. Like, my tastes are always changing, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, we got bits raining on us over here. It looks like
that's 137 megahertz.
Oh,
thank you, buddy. Appreciate
for
it.
the notorious DMG fam. Ho, thank you.
I like it. So I think it's interesting kind of going from rules crunchy to rules light, and like, do you find that's just like a palate cleanser for you, or does it actually just seem like you're kind of evolving in one direction or another as you kind of go?
It might be a palate cleanser. It's a good way of looking at it, because leading up to that, I played, I want to say, most exclusively 5e for a year or two leading up to that, and I got kind of tired of it. And I'm like, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
So then I looked towards crunchier, heavier games.
Yep, definitely feeling that a little bit in our game.
Yeah,
coming from Pathfinder to 5e, I was like, okay, this is cool. It's a little different. It's a little hollow. Okay, well, I'll just focus on the role play.
you can tell with 5th edition, they dialed it back a bit, and they were like, let's make a system that's for everybody. Like, let's make a system anybody can sit down and start actually just playing. Because I think the 3.0, 3.5 it was kind of a wall that you kind of had to hit and then climb up to get to a point where you're like, I can finally play this game. Yeah, and that you weren't even playing it well mechanically at that point. You were able to play it though. Like,
the old learning cliffs are real.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly. Yeah, no, 5e. It's funny. We had a conversation about this over on my Discord. I think it was last week, and 5e is a good system, and they did scale it down. I think they took the best of the things from 2nd edition and 1st edition, and they made it super approachable. And that speaks to the popularity of that game. And while it's not everybody's game, it is a good game. It's well designed, and the popularity speaks volume.
And they're slowly getting it all back in there. I mean, as they put out more books, every book comes out with a new version of rules for a fighter archetype or a fighting style. Like, they're slowly putting a lot of stuff back in that I think people are missing. Like, I think we're worried because, and it happens every time they put out a new edition, right? It's like, oh my god, there's no options in this game. I'm like, give it a year or two. Like, just let them pump out some more books. It's coming. The content creep will get there. Just stick with it. Eventually, be like, there's too many rules. We need a new edition. Like, go right back to it.
Exactly. It's bound to happen. I was saying that the two things that would bring me back to wanting to run 5e at this point is an advanced player's guide. I'd be like, all right, I'm all in, right? Which is what we're talking about. Or B, Dark Sun. Give me Dark Sun, and I'm I'm all in. Yeah. I'm jumping back over to 5e.
Is that your favorite of the box settings?
It was. We played a lot back in the day too. That was the other thing we pooled our money together for. We did Forgotten Realms. I was going to say Forbidden Realms because of Forbidden Lands. Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, Mask of the Red Death, Birthright, Dark Sun.
Birthright was cool.
Birthright was really cool. There's probably one or two more. We tried a lot of them back in the day.
Do you also then pick up the modules for those settings? Do you run like Curse of Strahd? Do you run Tomb of Annihilation? Do you get into the module part?
In those days when we were kids, no. We didn't sink our money to that. We just kind of created our own adventures.
You kind of homebrew them up in those worlds. Yeah. You use the worlds, but you homebrew up the actual stories inside of them. Okay.
Exactly.
That's kind of how we started out too. Eventually we got to where we just threw the setting books away and was like, screw it, we can build our own world.
Yeah.
Just we can do it. Like, make our own maps and do our own thing. We don't need to live in these other people's worlds. We'll make our own.
So kind of glancing at our chat over here. Some of the details that we're kind of going into right now are just more of game settings that have existed over the years. So the ones we've been talking about, Ravenloft and Birthright and all these other ones, these are just like specific campaign worlds. There were like books put out for them, both like gaming wise and also like just actual novels and such that had huge followings amongst D&D players. And, you didn't have to play them. They were just kind of like out there as options. Like for us, we mostly played homebrew stuff, and we still mostly play homebrew stuff.
Yeah, our Everstorm game is 100% from the head of, Levi, our DM. All those maps and everything, they're all from him. He does.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of the other things we've been talking about so far have just been other game systems. A lot of them I haven't even heard of. So, it's really interesting to hear, the gaming experiences that one person is having could be completely different than another gaming group. Like for us, I mean, we really haven't dabbled too terribly far from, our safe spaces that we like to get into, like classic D&D and, World of Darkness stuff. Maybe some Star Wars here and there. I think we did like Big Eye, Small Mouth that one time.
I think I missed that one. We used to play. We had a few of the Marvel superhero ones over time.
Nice.
We played a couple of those with the old like D100 systems where you always rolled 100 on a chart.
A lot of fun, but God, was that a terrible system?
Right. But I mean, at the time, it's like it's what you had. Like you're like, look, it's a 100 system versus a 20 system. We're like, this will be great, and so it was just different. So it was fun because it was just different. Like.
The one thing that really drove me crazy about that was movement rules. It was just like, oh yeah, you can move like 6,000 miles in one round. So distance doesn't matter? Well, it matters. Everything's in units of distance. Why?
It only matters if the other guy tries to chase you.
Yep.
then who's running that fast matters.
It was a game that couldn't... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, movement is one of those rules that I've kind of started looking at differently as of recently also with playing all these different games. I used to be all about like the D&D or the Pathfinder approach where you can move X many squares on your turn and that's it. Or move X many squares, hit, and then keep moving. That blew my mind when 5e came around because I'd played 2nd edition. I hadn't played D&D since. In 2nd edition, you couldn't do that. I was like, well, you can move, attack, and move again? Cool. But with all these other games, movement is... I like the way it is approached with a lot of them. Like you mentioned Star Wars. I guess you guys have played the recent Fantasy Flight. You have... it's more abstract. It's more like range bands.
Right. Yeah.
Like you're entering, and Forbidden Lands is like that as well. You've been watching some of the episodes. It's range bands that you're moving in and out of. I've been looking at some of the tiny D6 games from Gallant Games, and I reached out to the creator. I had a question about movement. I said, I don't see anywhere in your book where you talk about movement. How far can you move on a round? And he goes, I don't like movement, so I don't write it. You can do whatever you want, move whatever you want. I was like, oh, that's an interesting approach. But it's interesting how different people groups and rule sets approach that one mechanic. There's so many different ways to it.
We have a particular DM in our group who plays with us every now and then. And when he ran a game, he ran the most abstract distance system in the history of distance systems. His name is Barry. He's my cousin. And anytime he was running a game, the units of measurement, whether it was distance moved, how far you could throw something, was always units from him to the fridge. So really? He was sitting at the time, but wherever he was standing or sitting at the time, it was that many hims to the fridge, berries to the fridge, BTFs as we call it. So you always knew how many BTFs you were, and it was a variable unit because he was always moving around. So if he got up and stood over at the other side of the table, a BTF was slightly different than it was 5 seconds ago. If he went to get something to drink, it was a very short distance of BTFs. So anytime you asked him something, wherever he was standing, that's how far he was away from it. That's how many units you had. It was...
This is one of those things that really only comes up. I mean, BTFs aside, it really only comes up if you're more crunchy. Like if you're kind of a theater of the mind player, distance doesn't matter. I mean,
which was the thing with Barry, because he was always very theater of the mind. There was no maps in his games. That's why we had this silly units that came up with.
Now, that's interesting because there's different, like just that difference, theater of the mind because of movement versus kind of the X's and O's. Like the things that you describe are different. Like when you have a map out, you're like, okay, these things are located in this way. I can see it like physically on the map. Whereas, theater of the mind, you have to paint this huge picture and hope everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that is causing kind of inconsistencies. You also have just kind of a richness of descriptions that sometimes fall away in those kind of X's and O's kind of map setups. Do you have a kind of a preference on which one you like to go with?
These days, because I run all my games online, I like to have a map for them to use. Growing up, we used Theater of the Mind, and I didn't realize that it's funny because we played war games or tabletop war games before this. I didn't realize that it was an option to use minis and play with them on a map. We never did that growing up. And then I started playing games online about 6 years ago. And I was like, whoa, there's maps for everything. And you could actually chart out where you're going. You could see everything. And it blew my mind that this existed and you could do it. And now I wouldn't do it any other way running a virtual tabletop. In person, I would use either or.
I think that sometimes certain systems almost require it.
Mhm.
Like I think about like Pathfinder, when you think about the opportunity attack system, and so many things that are built into classes that involve movement. You know, whether you're taking feats like spring attack. Spring attack is nearly pointless if you're theater of the mind, because you're just like, yeah, I hop in, I hit him, and I hop back out. Well, okay, I guess I won't hit you, you know, because you did that. That's cool. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but on a board, you know, if you make one wrong step, then he gets a chance to thwack you if you don't have the right skills or the right feats, you know. So I think that when there's systems that have that built in mind, and I think that's kind of where, like, when people talk about like fourth ed, I think fourth ed was like very map intensive. Like it was very needed a map, you know, and like, so I think that's kind of where, you know, you hear a lot of negative opinions of 4E sometimes, but I think it's just because it seemed very much like on the map versus previous systems. But I think even with third ed, you saw a lot of it. But I just think that, you know, those systems, when they're built that way, almost require it.
Right. That's a good point as well.
Versus Vampire. Vampire is very free and loose. You can do Vampire with next to nothing. So
right, you got games like Vampire or Powered by Apocalypse or Fate, right? Where it's very abstract, right? You're not confined to rules, and it's very open ended. But I'm looking forward to trying 4th for the first time. Chuck, who's in the chat who gave you the bits, he's going to be running it for us. So
that's awesome.
you're playing with Chuck? I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4E is cool. Like it's definitely its own style. Like you're definitely going to be, you know, crunchy, definitely map oriented. If you like tactics, it is really rich.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the Warlord class was freaking so cool. Like,
yeah, I love
Warlord. I dug a lot of 4E, but nobody else did. So
like
never got to play it.
My brother-in-law, he swears by it. He won't try anything else.
Wow.
He will not play any other version of.
There it is. The guy running
Chuck.
the game.
That's Chuck. He's like 4E is the worst.
Yeah, and he's running it for us.
That's amazing.
He's a glutton for punishment. He just finished a 4E game, I believe. So
well done, Chuck.
So
right,
let's talk a little. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing in your game recently. You've been running Forbidden Lands.
Yeah,
and you have one. You were running two groups at the same time. Were they in the same game world? I couldn't never quite tell if they were in the same game world or if they just knew that there was another game.
They weren't. I thought about it, but because the guys on the Tuesday night, they were just short term. They just wanted something to play for a few weeks before we transition to something else. So I reused a lot of the material. Like the map was already there. There's a lot of pre-built stuff. So I was like, oh, let's put them through the same meat grinder and see what happens. But that would have been interesting to put them in the same world. I have contemplated if I were to run two Forbidden Lands games, kind of have them in the same world and then like hear of each other's deeds and things like that. Because it is built for that type of play. And I had toyed with it when I first got it because I do love the game that much, but I do not have enough time to run multiple Forbidden Lands games in a week.
And we were discussing we were discussing before broadcast a little during soundcheck time that it's a very brutal, like sometimes unforgiving game. Like, is that something that appeals to you as a? Do you feel like it's a challenging system then? Like, do you? I mean, you were talking about how different mentalities your two different groups are. Like, one seems to embrace the challenge, and the other maybe was like, I don't know, this is a little outside of our comfort zone, you know.
It's fun. I have three different groups that I play with on the channel. We do games on 3 different nights. So the Tuesday guys who were the first to have a member go down and decide, yeah, this isn't a game for us. I think they're more about the experience and the story than necessarily, I don't know how to I don't know. Is it reality? I don't know. Or the harshness. It is a harsh game. So I don't know. They want to see that full arc.
Full story arc.
Yeah. Whereas the Friday night guys are cool with the mortality of the game and they welcome it. Whereas my Sunday night guys, literally one of them asks me every week to kill him on stream. I haven't done it because I'm not that kind of DM, you know, despite what you guys may think, because I did kill someone a couple weeks ago. One of my players literally asks me every week. He's like, please kill me on stream.
Hey, I totally get it.
All of them are like fine with death. Like they're more than okay with it. So it's interesting the mentality between players and between groups that I've also learned by doing this and running multiple games for multiple groups and people.
And that'll bring us into tonight's first topic that you had put up, was letting players drive those narratives. So you got 3 very different kind of groups.
Yeah.
As a DM. And one of the things you kind of wanted to talk about some tonight, kind of spinning off from where we went last week, talking about the power struggles between DMs and players. So you're talking now about wanting to let your players drive those plots. Now, if your Tuesday group is like a very narrative group, it's probably easy to let them drive. Do you struggle with the other groups letting them drive those plots versus your Tuesday because they're so arc focused?
No, not really. Forbidden Lands is kind of built for that. In other systems, maybe more so. It is built as a game like it is a random hex crawl. You're rolling on tables as you go. But there is a story. There is a campaign that I am running, and it's knowing when to put those pieces in and listening to your players. You really need to, and that's where the collaboration comes in. Listen to the players and their cues when they're ready for them, when's the right time, when you can really take that campaign and tie it into your players and their backstory, something they're excited about. So it makes them feel like they're driving it and it's their decision, they're moving it forward, but you're really still moving them on that path. That's the real trick, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to handle it too. Like we've been talking a little bit about, planning styles for campaigns. The thing you've been showing in Discord has been like the buy your pants or planning well ahead. And I think, what was it, like pantsters?
The pantser versus the plotters, I think, or the planner versus the pantster. That's what it is. Those are apparently the recognized terms for the quote unquote two styles of DMing now.
Pantster and plotster? What is it?
Yes, the planter, those who plant their plot. And then there's the pantster who rides by the seat of their pants. Those are apparently.
Yeah, I would say like one of those styles is probably easier to deal with player motivations and drive, right? So like if you're a reactive DM to some degree, so I'm assuming that would be like the by the seat of your pants kind of running style. You set up an outline and you say, here's the things I think is going to happen. I know my NPCs really well. I know the setting extremely well. So wherever the players go, whatever they do, I can figure out what happens.
Right.
In that, I think those sorts of games, if you have the right players that are like motivated to actually drive plot, I don't think you could find a way that they're going to be more motivated by the game because it's literally tailored to what they're attracted to in the game.
I agree, because otherwise those players are going to feel like they're on rails.
Right. And the other flip side of it, is you go with the totally planned out arc. If that's what's going to happen no matter what my character does, and I'm just along for the ride, okay, I'll read the book.
And that's an important lesson that I actually learned recently between the Tuesday and the Friday groups, is because the Tuesday groups afterwards, after the whole death, and we decided not to play that game anymore, and it's fine. They said that they felt that they never really had an option or a clear path, and I found that very interesting because I was like, it's up to you. Like, whatever you guys want to do, I am going to facilitate it and I will pick up on it and I'll just make it happen. Like, you guys shape this story. And I told them that from the onset. And then afterwards I said, like, we never really felt that we were on a path. So that was very interesting. And I learned that group almost needs or wants that guide. I don't know if they need it, but maybe they want that breadcrumb or something. Whereas the Friday night guys are just like, let's do it. Like, let's forge a trail. You watch them with the donkey. Like, let's go. Let's go 2 more hexes. Let's see what's up ahead. Let's see what's going to happen.
Yeah, they were going to kill that donkey, man. Yeah. They were trying hard to kill that donkey.
They want to make their own story. And whatever happens, happens. And it's very important as a GM or DM or whatever you want to call it to pick up on those cues. One of the other places I've found also to really listen and to find what's important to them, so you can take that and then turn it into a collaborative effort also, is in your session recap. They'll tell you what was important to them last session. So you've got your plot and everything you want to do this week, and you're like, oh shit, and you're like changing it to like what they're saying because that's what's important to them, right? And that's going to that collaborative storytelling. I thought, it was going great in this direction, we're going to continue on. And they could care less about what I thought it out and wanted to do. And they picked up on like an NPC in some town and they thought they were important. They want to follow this guy. And like, okay, let's go in that direction.
This guy now has a story, I guess.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of how I run, for better or worse. I think there are some strengths to the people that have like that George R.R. Martin kind of like, I've got this thing planned out till the end and I'm never going to write the end of the story because I'm going to die first. But, whatever that is. But anyway, like there's a strength to that, and that the players can feel like there's, continuity all the way through. There's a some kind of theme or style that's consistent. But for me, like in a game, I want to play a game. I want to have a lot of interaction. I want to have dynamics to the sessions. And I think you get a lot more of that whenever the players are in that control seat a little bit. Now, obviously, there has to be something there, but I always kind of view the DM as more of a facilitator of fun than the person who's just like in charge of everything. Whereas I think by the book, it kind of like sets you up to think, yeah, I am the arbiter of the whole world. Everything rides or dies on my influence. But I think it's better if like the whole table is just kind of involved in the process, because like you were saying, the players are going to tell you what they want, what they liked, and what they paid attention to. And that recap is a great way of doing that. If, like you said, if they don't mention anything about the plot that you laid out there,
it's time to crumple it up, throw it aside, and go on down the path they told you. Or there's people who never pick up on that. And those are the groups I find that fall apart. And I think it really is a learned skill. Like I always didn't pick up on it. And it takes time to step back and listen to the players. Because as DMs, I think at some point we're all proud. Like, I've created this story. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be epic, and you're going to love it. And then you start running it, and they want nothing to do with it.
Yep. I've done that before.
Yeah, it happens. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Big blow to the ego.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. You got to, you develop that over time, the kind of the toughness, I guess, to understand that it's a lot of, trying things out, seeing what works, throwing spaghetti on the wall,
Right.
Some of it might stick, hopefully.
Yeah.
Whether it's a setting, a style of game, group by group, one thing may work, one won't,
Mm-hmm.
And
it helps when you're playing with people that you've been playing with a long time, because you kind of know them better. Like I'm running a game, like I said, every other Sunday at just my local game shop with 5 people who I didn't know prior to them sitting down making their characters for the first time. So I don't know anything about their gaming habits as players. Nothing, so I'm like, well, going into my first couple of games, I'm like, I need some story plot. I need fun NPCs. I need something for them to do. And then I will slowly figure out which ones of them are the role players, which ones are the mechanics people, which ones are the power gamers. I'll figure all that out as I go. And I have. Right. I've kind of got my hand on it now. I don't have a terribly large, strong role player in the group. They're all very mechanics. So I know what I'm playing with. I got a pretty good idea of, what I'm going to be doing from here. So that gives me then the opportunity to decide if I have any good story arcs as a DM that I can rope into this campaign world that I'm kind of building from the inside out a little bit, and start to rope those things in there and be like, okay, I can do this. Like, this is something my normal group never would go for. But now I have that ability to drive this thing a bit more as a DM, and these guys will totally sit right on the rails and enjoy it like it was a roller coaster. That's that's how they are. If I tried to have them just create their plot, they would probably never get anywhere. They would never leave town. 2 of them are like brand new players that have never played a game before their whole life. They just sit there like, I don't know what to do. But,
I think that's probably true of new players in general, right? If you come to a session, you're like, I don't know what's going on. Don't make me in charge, and I think once you kind of hit a certain point in your experience of gaming, I think you do kind of get more comfortable with that idea of kind of investing and creating your own content, so to speak. And I think that was for us, a lot of that came from like LARPing, where we keep harping on this,
for me and you, it was
after episode, but like, that's where we kind of got our first taste of it, generally speaking, there is some plot that's happening, but you got to make your own fun, and so you kind of learn to do that over time.
Well, let me tell you what LARP does. This is what LARP will do to you as a player. When you're at a tabletop game, you write up your character background, you fill out your sheet, you take it to your friend who's a DM, and you hand it to him, and you're like, here's what I want to do. And your DM reads every page of it. Like, oh, this is great. And then, like, he starts putting out story points for you and plot lines, and you're like, oh, this is going to be... When you do that at LARP, you walk into the ST table and you're like, hey, here's my LARP character and here's my 2-page background. They pick it up and they go, okay, cool, and they file it in a file over here.
Yep.
At that point, you realize you're on your own. Like, you got to go do your own thing because no one else is going to. Like, no one's going to write it for you. You have to go write it yourself. So
That's funny.
And I think some of that also comes down to alignment. I think if you're running, like, say, an evil game, right? Evil by definition drives games, right? Like, the bad guy's doing something and good reacts to it. Like, so the player's generally reacting to some antagonism. And then when you flip to a bad guy game, players are like, okay, so what's happening? You're like, I don't know, what crazy shit are you up to?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So it's a little different, and I think maybe that's why we didn't succeed with our evil game, right? Because that's not the way we play.
Well, I think likewise, like, people just, I think sometimes people always expect evil to make the first move, but you can always have good make the first move. Like, you can have evil party hanging out in Mount Doom, not doing any, just minding their own business, and then one day, fancy group of paladins and other people decide they're going to build some sort of monument to some fire god up on the side of your mountain, and you can decide to run them out. Like, you can have, even though they're not doing anything evil, they're just clearing forest for a lumber mill or something, like, whatever you're going to do, right? Like, they come destroy your forest. Now you got to go run them out, even though you're the evil guys. Like, you're.
I've not heard of very many successful evil campaigns. I've never played in one. I've never run one, but yeah, it seems to be a general problem. Is that they fall apart, or they backstab each other. Someone else, and it just falls apart. Nobody wants to play it anymore. They're like, oh, but I'm playing.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's hard to do.
You really have to set it up well. Like, if all the players are like on board, same team, interlocked backgrounds, that kind of stuff, maybe it works. But you have to have some real established ground rules to make it happen. Otherwise,
I played in one. There was one successful long-term evil campaign I've ever played in, and the guy had, when I made a character for it, he sat down, helped me make a character, and he was playing first edition D&D. His group was older than me, considerably older than me, and when I would play in the game, he basically goes, "Okay, here's the ground rules. You guys can do whatever you want to NPCs. You don't get to do anything to each other. You guys are putting aside your differences to work for this one massive overlord who will basically kill you if you so much as look at each other wrong." It was almost like Suicide Squad. You had the explosive bomb around your neck, and he would pull the trigger if you started getting out of line, right? So, like, that was pretty much how the game. You were under, basically, the gun was to the back of your head, and you were out there doing what he wanted you to do to a degree. He didn't care how you did it, as long as you weren't stealing or killing each other. So once that was kind of put out on the table, then the rest of it was, we were still able to be pretty evil. It wasn't too hard to do there, but.
Man, I mean, it takes a lot like that. I mean, and that is interesting because you kind of have to fire out those sorts of like trope kind of things like that, like the Suicide Squad style. Like, otherwise, it just doesn't work,
Yeah, I mean, and that movie didn't do so well either. It was really hard for them to put together too, But there's a lot of other good reasons that movie flopped like it did. But
well, exactly. The source material's good. I don't know if you ever read the old comics. Those are great.
Yeah. So, So, getting back a bit to your players,
driving or I guess it's more of a collaboration, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be. Like, because sometimes I struggle with that a little bit because, like, I'll start working on a game. Like, I ran over the last summer, I ran a game that went from January until October, and it was a Pathfinder game, but I ran it in a modern setting, for better, for worse. And it was so I completed that. I completed those 10 game sessions that I kind of had written, and then we started Everstorm roughly about the same time that it ended. So Levi took over DMing, and now I'm a player. So I've got Levi's games go for like our last went 3 years, and I don't expect Everstorm to be probably any shorter than that. So I've just got 2 more years to work on what is effectively like season 2 of Raining Bullets. So when I get around to deciding to run Raining Bullets again, I've got 2 years of making NPCs, deciding what these NPCs are doing. Slowly those things become some story structure, plot lines. I get to advance my world that I created a bit, redesign where things are in town. But at some point or another, I start writing a certain amount of story onto it.
Mhm.
Like it's, Jeff likes the bag of bones thing where he just dumps the bag of bones on the table. It's like, build me a skeleton. I usually build a spine.
Okay.
And then my players can attach however many legs, wings, arms they want on this thing as they want to go along. And then, eventually when we're done, we have this creature, if you will. Like, that's kind of how I DM. But usually I at least start with the spine. Like, that, I guess that's kind of like, and I hate to use his analogy, like, that's how, when you flesh these things out, like, that's usually where I start with mine. Do you find yourself doing that at all? Or do you just, like, are you just like Jeff, you just throw the bones on the table and see what they build?
For the overall story or like that session?
Either. That's what I'm saying. Like,
for the overall story, I think you have to have the framework. It can be moved around, I'd say, but you have to have an idea of where you're going towards. Just like if you're writing a story, right? You have to have an idea of that end goal, and what the players are working towards, so you can kind of seed it from the beginning. But I think you should be able to move those pieces around. So have a spine, but you can move the columns of the spine up and down as need be. When it comes to the sessions, and you're starting to put on like the ribs and everything else, what I like to do is I like to know really, really well what we're going to do that session, what my goal is, where I want them to end up, if possible. A whole bunch of little offshoots and possibilities that can happen in that session, depending on what direction they want to go. And then like a whole bunch of pre-made NPCs with just a short little background description and this and that I can just throw in there. Like, I want to talk to this guy, or is there a guy in town who does this? I want to meet that. And then it's kind of created around there. So start to lead them towards that end goal, but then they kind of decide where it goes. And I have the pieces of the bones to fill it in as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what I find myself doing a lot too. And that's I think Jeff, as a player in my most recent game that I ran, will tell you, like, that game did not go places I thought it was going to when I first wrote it. Like, I'm not going to get into like heavy details on it, but it very much took some different paths I was not expecting. Like,
it was a little unorthodox. I'll give you that.
And one of these things,
did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was fine. I didn't have any problems with it. I was more worried that the players weren't enjoying it. Like, I wasn't for sure really where they were at in it. But just trying to gauge where I thought they were from session to session. But what was interesting is like, I found that playing on Roll20 made me feel like I needed, as a DM, a bit more control, because there was only so much I could create ahead of time, and if they wanted to veer off of that map, suddenly I got nothing.
It's true.
You know the mind time, baby.
I know. So then you're suddenly in theater of the mind's eye, and they're like, well, is there a map? And like, no, there's no map. So then they to a player, they're like, oh shit, we took a wrong turn. It's like the GPS is like recalculating. They're trying to find their way back to where they're supposed to be. Like,
it's true. That's the other thing I'll do. I'll prepare like a number of maps based off of where I think an encounter might happen, but it could be that the player will take it in a direction that is not pre-prepared. And I found Roll20 good, but also hindering, like in your case for that. Like, one session I was running, I was doing, I don't know, it was like Actun Cthulhu. Years ago. It's a Savage Worlds setting we were doing. It's a World War II Cthulhu. And all of a sudden they decide they're in occupied Germany, they're behind enemy lines, they're undercover, and they decide they want to start a fight in a church. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't think they're going to start a fight in an occupied town. So quickly, they're talking about discussing it. I'm on another tab in Roll20, dragging and dropping pews and this and that, and building a map, and they had no idea that it didn't already exist. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I just did this on the spot, and the players had no idea. But at the same time, you don't always have the freedom to do that.
No, you don't.
Yeah, that's stressful.
Right. And you don't want to run a combat and sometimes like the NPC you don't have a sheet for, because you weren't expecting that guy to do that much. So you only kind of have a partial sheet, and the next thing you know, they're like, I stab him. You're like, oh shit.
I was going to say, have you forgotten about
I don't even know how many hit points this guy has. I hadn't even gotten to thinking about this guy. He was just supposed to give you some clues, and you were supposed to take off to go to the next map, and now we're running a combat with this guy. Okay. So you're quickly throwing numbers on a sheet just to make it work.
Right.
Which is, like I said, it's harder to do in 20 than it is when you're running at a table. You can just write down some jot numbers real quick on a piece of paper and you're done. But it's a little harder to do on 20.
Yeah.
That's very true. Very true. It depends on the system too, though, maybe.
Yeah, sometimes.
because a lot of these rules light games that I'm going towards now, they're known as like a lot of them are OSR type of games where they rely less on the rules. It's kind of like, here's the framework, and if a rule question comes up or if a comment breaks out and you don't have this stuff prepared, just go with it. Just create something on the spot. And that's just kind of like the mentality behind these games. So part of that might be behind the game that you're running as well. Because I know if I was running like 5e, I'd be like, oh shit, I don't have any of this prepared. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what his abilities are.
I think you see a lot where people do that. They just make it up on the fly, even with a game like 5e or Pathfinder. They make a ruling at that moment and then come back to it later. They're like, okay, this is what we're doing right now. And then I look up the rule and I'm like, okay, here's how jumping actually works. Next time he decides to jump, now I know what we're doing. But I think at the time, you just, to keep things flowing, you just make a call and you go. It's just, with it. Yeah. I think it's sometimes as a DM, like you got to spend a certain amount of time on your players' sheets, knowing what they have, because that'll kind of direct you as to what options they've got. So I think it's just important to know that part, because then when you let them drive, you know what they're going to, you know their tools that they have that they're going to be using, because they're going to use what's on their sheet. You know, they're going to use that to try to advance things in some way, shape, or form. So
you know, when you're getting a weird question like, so Matt, if I did this and approached that and this, what sort of role would I need for that? You're like, okay, where are you going with this? You got something in mind? What are you working towards?
And the more they don't want to tell you, the more that you know you're not going to like the answer that you give either. Just,
you remember that time there was a jet ski in the scene? Well,
yeah, I've got one player like that, and I've caught on to him.
So one of the things that I put a poll out this week on our Twitter. I don't know if you saw it or voted in it, but we put out a question out there, and this involves, again, how as a DM I put plot structure together and how much I let my players drive or not drive, is dealing a lot with, as I said, I'll build NPCs, and eventually some of them will eventually kind of become more of my end boss material. So my skeleton often ends up with a head. Right. I got a head at the end of the skeleton and a tail. You get to start the tail, you work your way to the head of the skeleton, and then you cut the head off and the story ends, probably. You know, it's a lot of times how these things kind of go. Right. So for me, because I have usually a lot of time to work on games before I get a group of players to play in them, I find myself doing that. And I think that lends more to that DM narrative versus the player narrative, because players, if they start wandering off, you just got to kind of plop down things as in the direction they're headed. But you find, now you were kind of saying earlier, you do shorter arcs, so you don't necessarily always have like an end boss, if you will, a bigger bad end guy that you have to worry about. Yeah,
these days it's just I'm doing short little hits on a game. But I have done longer ones in the past, and I've approached it where I've tried to establish them early on, but this was years ago, and I almost forced it on the players. Like, this is your bad guy, so you have to hate him. He's a terrible person. I would do it differently now going forward. And like you were saying, like it's your job as a DM. So inject it and make it part of the story, but don't cram it down their throats, I think is what I would do. Like, leave calling cards and this and that and build the intrigue over time to this person or being or creature or whatever, right? And lead them in that path. Instead of like, this is the bad guy, you have to go after him because that's a story.
Oh, right. Yeah,
it's tricky because like a lot of people have a lot of trouble with big bad guys and how to put them in the game. And as you can see, we continue talking and talking and talking, and that is a great topic we get into of how to deploy your big bad evil guy into your campaign. And check that out. We'll have that linked as well, connected to this one. I'll put it up here over probably Dustin's face. Why not? And just go ahead and click that. You'll get the whole conversation with Jowzam. I want to say again, thank you so much for Jowzam. Appreciate the guests coming on and sharing their own personal experiences with us, because otherwise it's just two of us sitting here talking to ourselves. And hope you guys enjoy that too. We also have links here for my YouTube channel of Rain Survives for Let's Play game series. And we have Dustin's channels, which are Plague State, and that's his guild for all kinds of online games. And of course, you see Jowzam has his links up there with his page. Definitely give him a follow and a subscription if you can. His stuff is really cool. I'm really excited about it. So anyway, thank you so much, folks. We'll catch you on the next episode, and hopefully you'll catch us live sometime. Till then, ta-ta.